Hello, everybody watching, and thanks for joining us for these conversations for language learners hosted by Preply. Our goal with these talks is to help you overcome your challenges and also see how to make language learning more enjoyable and effective. And today we're going to answer your questions, and we're going to answer some very common questions about the English language. So with us today is Jennifer from the YouTube channel English with Jennifer. Jennifer, I've been really excited to have this conversation with you, and a real pleasure to have you here. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I guess, first I should say to the ladies, Happy International Women's Day.
Exactly, yeah. And from us as well at Preply. With us today, before we start, just a quick note on how this is going to work. So as you'll see, you have the chat to the right-hand side. Let us know where in the world you're watching us from. We're always interested to see people from different areas of the globe coming together to learn about languages, and also tell us about your biggest challenges you have when learning English. So let's see if we can answer them during this conversation. Of course, this Q&A is being recorded on YouTube, so if you miss anything, just jump back when the video is when it's live. And and if we haven't managed to answer your question, you can always leave a comment below, and we can get to them after the live as well. So we're going to be talking a lot about English speaking skills, which is something you can do with Preply. So Preply is a way to connect with a tutor for one-on-one online language lessons. We're offering 70% off your first lesson, and that's with the link in the description. So if you're interested, please check it out. So that's enough from me. Jennifer, I recommend we get started. So first of all, welcome. You've been creating videos on YouTube for a long time now. So I believe you started your channel back in 2007 and have since grown a lot. So yeah, lots of English speaking tips, how to upgrade your English skills, and lots of advice on Jennifer's channel. So if you wouldn't mind just telling us, first of all, your origin story in a way, as if you're a superhero. How did you get started with becoming an online English teacher in a way, and for so many people as well?
Right. Well, again, thanks for having me. And hello, everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Jennifer, and I'm from English with Jennifer. I have been online teaching English since 2007, but I'm going to reveal a little bit of my age here. I've been teaching since 1996. I'm a classroom teacher. That's how I started out. I started teaching private lessons and in the classroom. It began in Russia. When I came back to the US, and I am an American, born and raised in the state of Pennsylvania, I decided to continue teaching English in the classroom. But motherhood sort of opened up a new path for me in life in general. And in 2007, I had a 2-year-old son, and my daughter was just a few months old. I missed teaching, but I didn't see an easy path for me to go back into the classroom. So because I missed teaching and I just wanted to teach, I began experimenting on YouTube. So I put lessons on YouTube. I didn't know too much about video editing at the time, but people were forgiving because I was just trying to be helpful, and apparently I was helpful enough that people continued to watch and recommend my channel. And I promised if they kept watching, I would get better at making videos. And so that just grew. So YouTube led to more projects, and of course now I have hundreds of videos, and I'm just very happy that I've been able to continue all these years.
Brilliant. And yeah, obviously great content you're producing for English learners. So and a lot of your channel, you cover sort of pronunciation tips and intonation. Obviously you cover lots of aspects of the English language as well. And I'm curious, a common question that we get is improving your pronunciation and also improving your accent, your English accent, is it important? Or is it a bit of a waste of time compared to, reading or all the different skills that you can learn when learning English?
Nothing is a waste of time in the sense that there are language skills. It's not skills. plural. So I'm a teacher who believes in this whole language approach that all the skills are important. Of course, pronunciation is important because when we're communicating, through spoken English, we need to be understood, and we need to understand other people, and we need them to understand us. If the influence from your first language is so strong that people have trouble understanding you, then you need to work on your pronunciation for clarity, for accuracy. It's not about sounding exactly like a native speaker. My personal opinion is that it is never about accent elimination, but accent reduction. Unless you're trying to be an actor in a film and you have to convince people that you're British, Australian, American, whatever, then you can try to go for that perfect 100% match. But everybody has an accent. I have an accent. You need to be understood. That should be the goal. It's not bad if you have that ability to sound exactly like a model that you wish to sound like, great. But for those who are still in the process of reducing their accent, please keep in mind that the goal does not have to be accent elimination. It's accent reduction so that you can have clear communication. That's the goal. So it's not a waste of time as long as you have a realistic goal. If your pronunciation of sounds falls within the range of what's understood, that's what you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being understood is, the core, I guess.
That's it. Yeah.
That's all you need. Brilliant. And we have many learners at Preply. So I think a lot of people in the chat will possibly be learners with Preply as well. And, many learners from Spanish speaking countries, Russian speaking countries, Portuguese, and there's certain sounds in English which are not in those languages. What are some sort of common pronunciation errors or problems that you see from people who are not native English that maybe they can work on to sound more natural?
Of course, there are tricky sounds, and you'll just go on YouTube and start typing and searching for pronunciation lesson topics, and you'll see that many learners want to know short I versus long E, the difference between mit and meat, right? The R's, the L's, the THs. So of course there are tricky sounds, but I'll tell you one of the most common errors, not just among students, but even among teachers, because I recall myself at the start and teaching, and I didn't know too much about how to teach pronunciation. You can make the mistake of thinking that pronunciation is only about producing clear sounds. And that's not true. That's only part of the picture. You want to have clear sounds, but there's a whole nother level of pronunciation. And that's how you're making words, how you're speaking in phrases, how you're speaking in sentences. So that's why I took the time at one point on YouTube to make a whole series on rhythm and intonation. I've given a lot of attention to this, not just in that series, but also in another one like oral reading fluency, because I believe what you really want to achieve is a natural sound. That's partly through the sounds, the individual sounds, consonants and vowels, but it's rhythm and intonation. Which words do you stress? And inside a 2 or more syllable word, which syllable do you stress? So having the right rhythm and intonation creates the music of English. And that's what you really want to achieve to sound more natural. So it's clarity of sounds, not perfection, but clarity. And then achieving the musicality, the rhythm and the intonation of English. So don't make the mistake of thinking that it's only about producing clear sounds. And then rhythm intonation will add in there linking, having smooth speech. So there are a lot of aspects of pronunciation that need to be addressed. So you need to have a bigger picture of what you're going for when you say, I want to speak clearly. What does that mean? Yeah.
And perhaps could you give some examples of, so I know some people have issues with like stressing some parts of sentences or words. Can you give some examples of like errors that you would see that you would fix?
Well, let's talk about just rhythm. You don't stress every word, right? We stress what are called content words. So this is where you have to realize and appreciate how all the skills come together. So having some understanding of grammar can actually help you have better pronunciation, because when we talk about content words, we're talking about nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, the words that carry content. Those are the words I'm stressing. Those are the words I'm stressing. Those are the words I'm stressing. Those words stressing. So you get a sense of which words carry the content. All those other little words are function words and they're not stressed. So having a sense of what to stress is a great start. And then this is something that I practice in my videos with my private students, with my Patreon members. And it takes a lot of practice to make those patterns familiar. Once you grasp the principles of what are content words, what are function words, you can apply this to anything that you're saying. We don't speak in long sentences because we need to breathe. So you need to know, how do we break up our long ideas into thought groups? And within a thought group, which words are the content words? Those words will establish the rhythm. So it's good to have a sense of that. Again, I have some free videos on YouTube that teach content words versus function words.
Yeah, really great examples there. And even while you were speaking, great examples. So you mentioned as well about practice, and some people struggle, especially now with COVID restrictions, to get the speaking practice and find some techniques to practice their speaking, and understand as well where their pronunciation is going wrong. Do you have some tips for practicing speaking skills at home?
There's some basic things that you can do. One of the things I have in the oral reading fluency series are short, easy texts, because you want to read. Reading is a wonderful skill. Reading gives you grammar, vocabulary, and all of that. But when it's a difficult text, your attention is focused on understanding. You don't have enough brain power left over to read with expression. So if you're going to practice reading aloud, I recommend reading something that you understand well already, because you've read it and you've looked up all the new words, or because it is rather easy and short. And I like short because you can read it multiple times. So the whole thought process behind my oral reading fluency series is that you take a short text and you practice it multiple times, not rushing it first, but going for clarity. And as you become more comfortable with the text, then you can speed up. And what you can do with any text is mark it up. When I say mark it up, it's by showing where are the thought groups, where can you logically pause? And then within the thought groups, which words are stressed? Which sounds do you need to connect? So you take a short text, mark it up, practice reading it aloud. It's wonderful just to record yourself. We all have smartphones. Get your smartphone out, record yourself on day one, and practice a couple times. And if you do this in the course of a week, probably by day 7, you will hear improvement. The text you'll probably have partly memorized by now, but your confidence with that text hopefully will have grown. I would be surprised if it didn't. But also by recording, that's a little bit of pressure that you place on yourself. You don't have to share the recording with anyone, but I do know that speaking to people in English creates a degree of pressure. And you do need to get used to that feeling of being under pressure to perform, right? So recording yourself it gives you that little bit of performance. The pressure of performance, and then you also have the chance to evaluate yourself. So that's one exercise that's very easy to do. You can use my text, you can use a short text that you find online, and choose something that's meaningful. I think that's another mistake. There is a point of doing drills. Drills help. And by drill, I mean like repetitive pronunciation. There is a time when I put drills in my own lesson plans, but we don't do 30 minutes of drills. And if I do drills, it usually builds into something more meaningful. Maybe the words that we're practicing are part of a text that we're going to read and then discuss. So those are the words that the student will be using in our discussion. So you want your pronunciation practice to be meaningful. And that's another reason why I push that oral reading fluency series. Is I don't just write text like in 30 seconds. I take the time to choose high frequency words and make the text special and meaningful. Because if you don't care about what you read, how can you read with expression? So you need to read things and practice things that are interesting and relevant for you.
Definitely. And I find, I mean, I'm learning not English because I'm native English, but Spanish, and I'm finding that reading great texts, stories, interesting things, is actually helping me to retain things and also bring them up in conversation. So at Preply as well, we have a feature that some of people joining the webinar will be familiar with, called conversation starters. And what they do is give yourself and your tutor something to discuss, whether it was in the news, whether it's something topical, something interesting. And I think if you have that to hold your attention, it's definitely useful to find, interesting things to talk about. Otherwise, you're not going to remember it.
And whether you're working with me, a Preply tutor, whoever you're working with, it's wonderful to have that access to somebody who can listen to you, give you feedback. Then the question is, what are you going to do between those meetings? How else can you extend the learning? So let's say you read something, you have a conversation with it, your tutor corrects you, gives you some feedback. Again, you can pick up your phone and give yourself that second chance, saying, okay, I heard my mistakes. I think I can explain what I meant better. I want to answer that question again. So even after the lesson has ended, give yourself that chance, record yourself, and you can do this a few times. By the time you get to your second or third attempt, you'll be more comfortable and more confident, just in terms of delivery, your word choice, and your pronunciation. So that's something that we can do during our independent study. You can give yourself those multiple chances to reach a higher level of accuracy. It's not a chance that you get in real conversation. You have one chance to answer a question or to say something, but that doesn't mean that you can't give yourself those second chances later. And by practicing a little more, then you will be ready for the next time.
Exactly. And I'm just reverting to the chat right now, and someone asked, what are drills?
Drills are just repetitive exercises. So for example, it could be focusing on a word. Maybe I want to talk about like TR. Some people have a little problem, TR, CR, and they're rolling their R's. Instead of train, they're saying train or something like that. And so we're going to practice train, true, try. So we might say 10 words that are with TR, and we just drill them over. I might even need to slow them down so the person avoids the trill. True, try. And it's repetitive, listening and speaking for a short amount of time. And then I generally pull away from the drill and take those words and put them into something more meaningful, a question for discussion, a sentence to react to, something.
Great. And one other question from the chat as well. Someone asked, when I speak, I confuse the present and past tense. So what are some ways to overcome that?
Having a mindset of what frame you're in. So you need to have your verb forms down, and that comes through exposure and practice. Even when students come to me and as a private student or on Patreon and this year, I really want to speak better. I'm like, that's great. But you know what? It's not always about getting the speaking practice, because you need to have exposure to the written language as well. When you see the words, it's just one more way that your brain can retain it, not just hearing it, but seeing it. And I know from all the years that I've worked with different people, those who come to me and have one of the really strong foundation are the people who love to read and spend time reading in English. I hear it. Sometimes they come and they're less confident in speaking, but they have a good hold on the grammar and in the writing. And then it's easier to build on that. We just need to give them the practice and the confidence to start using all of that in conversation. But you want to make sure that you're putting a little dose of reading into your study routine. Don't ignore the value of reading. It doesn't mean you have to read literature if you're not that kind of person. You could read online articles, blogs, something of interest, but you want to read because that exposes you to good sentence structure, and that's where you're going to encounter the grammar, like verb tenses. So don't overlook the value of reading.
Get a great foundation there, I think is great advice. And one other question as well from the chat. Someone asked, how do you get from B2 to C1 level? And now we encounter this question quite a lot with many different languages, is how do you, when you hit that plateau, how do you get to the next level?
Seek opportunities to practice. If you can work with a one-on-one tutor or some kind of live instruction, that's great because you can get your feedback. But it's creating the opportunities and immersing yourself as much as possible in the language. The people who I've seen make that transition, they watch a lot, they listen a lot, they read a lot. And so they're very comfortable with both spoken and written English. So I think you have so much available to you. When I was starting to learn languages, there was no internet, and I would have loved to have a tutor online. There was nobody like that. But even without tutors, there's so much available online. You can immerse yourself through songs, movies, music. And again, there's different types of reading and different types of listening. There are times when you want to focus your attention and really understand. So you're going to read an article, for example, you read it through just to generally understand. Then you do a second slower reading and you start looking up words. Then maybe the third time you just go through again because you can enjoy it more. You finally understand what it's all about. If there's an audio option, at that point you might turn it on and just listen and not read and digest it that way. You can do that, for example, on NPR, nationalpublicradio.org. They have podcasts with transcripts, so there's a lot to work with there. But there are also times where you just want the English to be around you, turning on a radio in the background, hearing some music, or just, putting on the news, and maybe you're fading in and out. Sometimes you're listening to it as you're making dinner. Other times, your attention goes in and out, but just having that around you doesn't mean that you have to focus 100% all the time, but it's there because you want that exposure. So you can have focused reading, focused listening, but there's also times you just want to do it for enjoyment, listening to a song just for fun. And reading sometimes, when you read novels, as long as you've got the basic idea of what's happening in the plot, you don't have to look up every word. Just keep going and enjoy the basic story. If you want to then go back at the end of the chapter and look up an underlined word, okay. But I was doing that in Russian. When I was living in Russia, I started picking up romance novels because that's what I wanted to read. They're fun, it's fun to read about romance for me. And I didn't understand every word on the page sometimes, but I was into the story and I wanted to know what happened next, Does she meet the guy? Do they fall in love? And I'm turning the page. No, I don't get every word, but it was okay. You're just reading for enjoyment. So find the balance, but make sure you're getting your daily dose of listening and reading. Expose yourself to the language.
Great advice. And there's one other question about something specific when it comes to English, the difference between B and P, and working around that pronunciation. So what are some ways that you can practice that?
B like to
Butterfly,
be or not to be?
Yes.
Or B. And P like peas in a pod? Yes, so we were talking about individual sounds. So there are a couple ways. Some people pick up certain sounds, just through listening, repeating, and then they have a high level of accuracy. If you are able to identify some of the sounds that you have trouble producing, then this is when it's helpful to go to YouTube or Instagram, whatever it is, find the pronunciation teacher that you feel comfortable learning from and listen to their explanation. I'd also argue it's nice to hear from at least two or more other teachers, because you can compare explanations and some of it will overlap, but there could be one particular explanation that really makes sense to you and will be more memorable. The point is, the teachers, hopefully I'm in that group, we're a group of people who can break it down. So if with consonant sounds, we can tell you how to produce that sound, what articulators, what parts of your mouth are used to produce that sound. So it's a good tool to go to if you have a teacher who can explain what parts of your mouth you use, which articulators, and how you use them. I do have one lengthy video on YouTube on consonant sounds, and I go over what's called place of articulation and manner of articulation. Where is the sound made and how is it made? If you can understand those things, then you can start mechanically correcting yourself and producing it. And again, you have your phone. You can record and listen and evaluate. Get a model and listen and repeat. Another thing you can do, I love recommending Youglish. I put it in my video descriptions all the time because it's such an amazing tool that they came up with, that if there's a particular sound or word, you plug that word or phrase into Youglish, you can filter for US, for British, or just, let it go and hear all the varieties of English. But the idea is that you can hear maybe 15, 20, 50 different people say that word or phrase. And again, you're training your ear to understand the acceptable range. So it could be peas in a pod. So you type in peas or peas in a pod, and you see maybe there are 5 people, maybe there are 15 people on Youglish, and you go through quickly clicking on the different samples, and you listen to the different speakers, and you can also probably identify a couple people who you particularly like in terms of accent and clarity, and repeat after that person. Youglish allows you to open up the transcript so you can see the full context of where that word or phrase was used, and it's very helpful that way.
Brilliant. Yeah, I've not used Youglish before, but it's definitely sounds like a fantastic tool to use.
And free.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a few, most likely a few business English learners. So many language learners or English learners at Preply are learning English for business. Now, you mentioned before about models. I think you mentioned about finding like a model. So perhaps is this one way of a simple way to start sounding more formal in English?
Yes, and someone's talking about movies. It reminds me, watching movies and TV shows also gives you a good sense of the language used and the levels of formality, because language is not just about saying words and using correct grammar. You have to have a sense of what's appropriate for the audience, for your relationship with people. So you might say something that's clear, that's grammatically correct, but it's not appropriate for that relationship. And if you watch enough movies and TV shows, you'll start to get a sense of what language is used in different situations, and how casual is the American workplace, for example. We're not overly formal usually. So that's also something to get used to. And it's really hard to explain. It's much easier to see in those kinds of situations. That's where movies and TV can really be helpful. But one piece of advice I have is that, if you're really talking about how to speak with clients, how to make a presentation, you're really getting into public speaking skills, and you want to go for clarity. Talk about another mistake. A common mistake is to assume that just because everyone else is speaking fast, you need to speak fast. If you speak so fast that you're losing control of your pronunciation, your ability to choose words, your grammar, you need to slow down. Don't worry about going slower than other people that you're talking with. You need to remain in control so that you can communicate clearly. So one of the pieces of advice I often give with pronunciation is just slow down. Just slow down. A lot of the mistakes start to correct themselves if you put yourself back in control of the speed at which you're articulating the words. So I'd say and also, if you think about great models, the models that people love and listen to and respect and sound like authority, those are the people who don't usually rush. A lot of people these days, if they talk about sounding presidential, they point to Barack Obama, former President Obama, a very good public speaker, and he speaks carefully and articulately. And when he speaks, you just want to listen because it's so beautiful. There are people who are gifted public speakers, and you can sort of emulate, copy that style, and you'll notice that they don't rush. It's not overly formal, but it's about speaking clearly so that people listen to your message and you know which words to emphasize. That also conveys importance when you're giving a message or delivering a presentation. People who talk so fast, you might ask them to slow down, by the way, if it's a conversation. I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you said. There are multiple ways you can politely interrupt or ask someone to paraphrase, to repeat. I saw earlier someone said, what about pretending? you can do that in certain situations, but if you're expected to fully participate in the conversation, you can't pretend your way through that situation. If you don't understand, you need to speak up and say something, and find ways that are less awkward to stop the conversation before you're so lost that it's pointless. So you need to say, I'm so sorry, but I didn't catch what you said, or that last part wasn't clear to me. I'm not sure what you meant by. You need to learn those types of expressions so that you can ask people to clarify. And then at the same time, on your own, you better be working on your listening comprehension so that your need to ask such things goes down, because people
Mhm.
might be patient at first, but if you are, you can't stop them after every sentence. But you have to find that balance between trying to ask for people's patience with you and willingness to paraphrase, but also your willingness to keep working on your comprehension.
Mhm. And likewise, if I'm speaking too fast, please put a message in the chat to say, "Hey Tom, slow down a little bit," and yeah, I'll get to it. So as well, I saw a comment in the chat that mentioned to watch TV. What's the best way to watch TV? So is it with subtitles? Should they remove the subtitles? What's your opinion on that, Jennifer?
Um, I have a few thoughts in my head. If it's movies and TV, if hopefully you're watching recordings, that's the best way, so that you can pause and you have full control over the experience. So the idea is that if you can watch it and just enjoy it. We talked about focused attention and just going with the flow, relax a little bit. You might just watch the first time and just try to follow along basically what's going on. Just watch it, watch the movie and enjoy it. You might then turn the captions on, and now though this is when you start pausing, because you need time to read and they're speaking fast and you don't have enough time to read, or because there are some words or expressions that you still don't get. So you need to watch that scene a couple times and try to guess what they mean. Or you get to the point where you do look a word up in a dictionary and find out, because you weren't able to guess from context. So again, there could be a faster watching and a slower, more careful watching where you're actually pausing and reading. You can work with scenes. That's something that we did in graduate school when we were watching a movie in Russian. We just watched a segment at a time. And
Mm.
there weren't transcripts, so we had to write it. Then the teacher confirmed if we caught all the words, and if we didn't catch it, then the teacher supplied the words that we couldn't hear. And then we watched the scene again to the point where, like, oh, now I hear it all. So, and then you move forward. By the time we got through that process, we were able to understand the whole movie. And it was such a joy then to put all the transcripts away and just watch it and enjoy. So if you
Mm.
want to get to that point, it will take time. You do need to watch multiple times. The first time I suggest just watching to understand, then you turn on the transcript and you start doing a more slow, careful watching, where you can look up words. And then you can also watch a segment, rewatch it without the subtitles or captions, and see if you can really pick up on that now. Right.
Mhm.
People have asked me on YouTube, by the way. I know there's a lot of videos, especially my earlier videos. I did speak very slowly and carefully, and I still do at times, because there are times where I feel it is important to explain and be understood, especially if I'm talking about complex grammar. I'm not going to speak at my fastest rate because this is important to be communicated clearly. But even with my basic students, I have a series where I work with two ladies who are they started at A2. They're high beginners with me. There are times when I speak slowly and carefully and simply. There are times when I actually speak fast. But often if I'm speaking fast, I'm doing it multiple times so that they can hear.
Mhm.
And they get used to me asking things like, I don't say anymore. Did you understand? They've heard me ask this multiple times, so I can say to these ladies who are still at this point like low intermediate, did you understand? Got it? They've
Mm.
heard me say that multiple times, that I don't have to slow those kinds of phrases down anymore. So
Mhm.
it's training your ear to hear the fast speech. If you haven't watched my fast speech series, I recommend that you do that, because my goal of that series is to make you aware of what's happening in fast speech, what are speakers doing when they drop sounds, change sounds, connect sounds. And if you're aware of those patterns, it will make it easier to understand the fast speech that you hear around you.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant advice. And one other thing about sounding natural that many people have questions about is idioms. So, are idioms and using idioms important to sounding natural in English?
Yeah, idioms fall into the category of vocabulary. Vocabulary is a skill. Whether it's vocabulary, like general, academic, or idioms, guys, someone's already also asking about understanding active versus passive vocabulary. It's completely natural, even for Tom and myself, to have more passive vocabulary than active vocabulary. There's more that we understand than we actually say. There are words that I've read before, but it may be for the first time when I'm using them, like, how do you say that again? Or am I using that correctly? Because it's not a high frequency word. Now, with idioms, the first thing you want to do is understand them. And I made this point in my most recent video when I talked about literary devices, ways we color our speech. Idioms, that's an example of a literary device. It's a colorful way of speaking, and the words don't make sense when you look at them and think about them literally. They have a figurative meaning. You have to go beyond the words to understand them, like raining cats and dogs or in the blink of an eye. What do those expressions mean? You first want to make them passive. Do you understand what it means when you read it, when you hear it? So yes, idioms are important. They're important to understand. Then comes the challenge of understanding which ones are worth making active, which ones are worth putting in your own speech. Again, watching movies, watching TV shows, listening to podcasts, having conversations, that will expose you to the ones that are used very often, so that you're not reading some book and say, oh, that's an interesting idiom, I'm going to use that. And then you end up using something that sounds like you're from the 1950s. Nobody uses that anymore. So you want to have awareness of, is it worth putting into your active vocabulary? How frequently used is it, and who is it used by? So keep in mind that the use of idioms can be cultural. Like Tom might have some British idioms that are over my head, I don't understand them, and I might have some that he doesn't get either. So there are idioms that can be cultural. There are idioms that can be generational, things that I say that my children who are teenagers would never say. So who uses those idioms, and is it appropriate for you to use them? Keep that in mind when you think about, oh yeah, I want to use lots of idioms. And don't try to overuse idioms. That's another common mistake, thinking I'm going to sound really natural by speaking fast and using lots of idioms, and I'm going to put phrasal verbs in every sentence because they use them a lot.
Yeah, that would be terrifying. I can visually say. And you mentioned as well about some English idioms that may go over your head. And someone wrote in the chat, how can I understand British people? Which is quite funny to me.
I think British English is so very lovely, but even within the UK, there are many different accents, and within the US, there are many different accents. This goes back to the value of pronunciation and giving time to pronunciation studies. Pronunciation is not just about you speaking clearly, it's also understanding the pronunciation of others. English is a global language. It's spoken by many different people. You can have your favorite teacher. If your favorite teacher is British and you want to study with that person and sound as much as possible like that person, great, but you will do yourself a disservice if you do not expose yourself to American English, Australian English, English spoken by non-native speakers. Because it's a global language, you need to train your ears to accept all different varieties. And there are people who will speak, and you will hear a bit of an accent. When I say accent, I mean influence from their first language, but perhaps it's still very clear. It's just, but it is within the range of what is understood. You want to train your ears to understand both. So this goes back to listening, making time to listen and to read. Find realistic goals and realistic amounts and work that into your weekly routine.
Brilliant advice. And so we're kind of wrapping up towards the end. And don't forget, guys, if you have any more questions, don't be afraid to drop them in. Now's a good time. And but I did have a question that I asked quite a few people, and that's how to create a great home language learning routine over a week. So it has to be a routine where you stay motivated, you stay consistent, you get the right activities in. What would this week look like for you? What techniques, what activities would you like to choose?
I think it's just general advice. First thing is you want to, one, have awareness of what your goals are. Awareness of how much time you can dedicate within a day, within a week. Maybe there's one day that it's just I can't do Wednesdays. It's just my craziest day of the week. Fine, but can you promise 5 to 15 minutes a day? What's realistic for you, and can you give more on the weekend? So try to choose something that's realistic and stick to it, and then choose materials that generally interest you so that you feel motivated, right? Whether reading, listening, whatever it is, make sure that you're hitting all the skills. You can give a little more emphasis to those skills that you need to work on. Maybe it's reading and listening because you really want to boost your vocabulary. But then I'd argue, you still want to throw in a little bit of the other skills. Can you write? Even if it's just for yourself, hopefully you can find a tutor or a teacher to give you some feedback. That's ideal. But even if you're working on your own, can you write 1 or 2 sentences a day just to get something down on paper? Because written English is different from spoken English, but also by writing, you're forcing yourself to recall, spelling, grammar. Writing is a different feeling, a different experience than speaking English. And actually, you'll find if you write more regularly, it will reinforce the grammar and the vocabulary that you need in conversation. When you're saying, I can't think of what to say, I know what I want to say, and I can't form the idea quickly enough in conversation. When you write, the beauty of writing is you have all the time in the world to think of a word. You can go back and correct it, which you can't do in conversation. So writing is a wonderful thing to work into your routine so that you can be ready for the next conversation you have. So give time to the different skills. I would say, can you read a little bit each day, even if it's scanning the headlines on a favorite news site, BBC, NPR, whatever you like. Scan the headlines and just make that your routine, just to be aware of what's going on in the world, but also to see the written English every day. You can also then take that a little further. I do have a video on YouTube about how you understand the grammar of headlines. As you're going through the headlines, can you rewrite those headlines into full sentences in your mind? And maybe once or twice a week, can you actually click on the most interesting headline, open up the article, and at least scan through it? If you have more time, can you actually read it? And then when you're done, what can you do? You can write a summary, you can speak your summary, you can react to it. So it's up to you. Maybe the minimum every day is to scan through the headlines and just translate, what's the full sentence of the headline? And then say 2 times a week at least, I'm going to click on one of these and scan through. And at least 1 time this week, I'm going to read a full article and make sure that I understand it well enough to summarize it, writing or speaking. Again, recording yourself, holding yourself accountable. If you have access to a teacher or tutor, that's when you can have your feedback. Hopefully you're meeting at least once a week. The other thing that will motivate you is group learning. If you can be part of some kind of community, whether it's a Facebook page, discussion page, that's why I push, like join my communities that I have. And when you feel a part of a community and you have fellow classmates, it motivates you. And it keeps you going. So it's much easier to find motivation in a group than completely on your own, independently.
Definitely. Great. And the one question that I saw was about English on the phone. Now, I have the same issue with Spanish. So someone speaks to me in Spanish over the phone. I'm doing okay, but I can't really understand it well enough. What are your tips with getting used to speaking English on the phone and hearing English on the phone and understanding?
Find a study partner. I did Japanese only for 2 years and I forgot pretty much all of it. But the fun activity that we did in our first year is that our professor paired us up, and once a week, again, something realistic. Once a week, I think it was once a week, we had to call our partner on the phone. Maybe it was every day. I can't remember. It was something realistic. And we had so little language to make use of, but we had to talk for at least 5 minutes in Japanese. And it was like, hi, how are you? I am good. How are you? Good. What's the weather like? It's very, very basic, but it's just getting over your fear of speaking on the phone, and you can get over that fear with someone who is patient and understanding. It might be another classmate. And the final thing, if I only have time for one piece of advice, is don't assume that the only way to get valuable practice is by meeting with a native speaker. You can meet with other learners, right? And that also will motivate you if you're like partners together and reaching a goal together. Study with other learners and study remember, just teachers, there are a lot of competent teachers out there. There are native speaking teachers, there are non-native speaking teachers. There are a lot of competent non-native English speaking teachers out there too. So keep them in mind too. There are some on Instagram with really great accounts. You can be inspired by how much they have achieved. But be a part of a community to motivate yourself. And if you can find a partner, you can have some daily chats, just even 5 minutes. Or if you can't do it daily, say, can we just meet twice a week or just call each other twice a week on WhatsApp, Skype, whatever, and just have a basic conversation to get used to speaking over the phone. Now, in terms of listening, again, you need to work some daily doses of listening into your routine so that you can understand that fast speech.
Great. And there was another question at some point to do with thinking in English, which is a very abstract concept in a way. How can we start to think in English?
Oh, that's a good question. I often say that if you've ever started to dream in English, that is a beautiful sign. When you first have your first dream, I'm like, oh, they're speaking Russian in my dream. It's like you're there. You're on that path to thinking in that language. So again, daily commitments and daily practices. Just talk. You don't even have to have a partner. Just talk to yourself. It's making yourself see the world around you in English as you're driving, walking to work or to school. Even if you can't speak aloud because people around you will think you're crazy, then speak inside your mind and say, okay, I'm going to work. And you're saying this. What do you see? Comment on the people. Look at objects around you. Do you know everything? Can you name everything? Can you describe everything? Or think about, what is my to-do list for today? What do I need to do? And say that in English. So there are ways to work English into your life every single day, even on those very, very busy days when you're washing your hands, washing your hair, doing a chore around the house. Can you switch your thinking consciously into English and put your thoughts and translate them so that they become more natural? So that's what I said, force yourself to think internally, have that inner monologue in English.
I think as well, for me, as a Spanish learner, having a trigger to do that helps. So if I go for a walk after work, I will immediately switch to Spanish in my head. Or if I get in the shower and I start to think about things, I try to switch to Spanish. So that for me is like a trigger. It's like an alarm to then do it.
You can have fun in your head if you're cooking something, even if you're just making toast or making yourself coffee. Imagine you're having your own reality show and your people are watching you and say, I'm making coffee. I'm getting my cup and I'm going to stir it in. I think I'm going to add some creamer. I'm going to add some creamer. So like, have an imaginary audience and speak to your imaginary audience. So if you have the freedom to speak aloud, do so. If you're in a place where you can't do that because it's not appropriate, then you do it inside your head.
Brilliant advice. And so we're just about wrapping up now. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you. Do you have any final words of wisdom, perhaps to keep the watchers and listeners motivated to keep going with their English learning journey?
Just remember a couple things. One, there is no shortcut. People ask, what's the fastest way, the quickest way? Don't believe anyone who tells you this is the fastest way to become fluent. You do this and you'll be fluent in 6 months. Choo. No, I don't believe it. But there are people who achieve fluency, and they do that through regular practice. So you need to make a commitment and have realistic goals, but find your sources of support. Find what inspires you. Even if you go back to a song or a poem that just gets you excited and say, this is why I love English. This is what makes me feel good. You know, you need to remember who and what inspires you and go back to those periodically. And again, if you can find a network of people, fellow learners, that's a good thing to do, whether it's a Preply community or a community with me. You know, it's very helpful to find group support and keep you on that path, and know that everybody gets frustrated in this long process of attaining fluency. It's not a short, easy road. It does take discipline and a lot of effort. And it's okay to feel discouraged, but then again, where do you turn to and who do you turn to get motivated again? So hopefully I could be one of those people for you.
Brilliant. And yeah, excellent. So we've covered so much here. There's so much to take away. Like I said to the audience watching before, we're going to republish this back onto YouTube. So if you missed anything or you want to listen to it over again, feel free to refresh the page and go back. And all that's left is to say thank you so much for speaking with us, Jennifer. It's been real delight to chat with you, get your insights. And thank you everyone for the brilliant questions and for asking for your most common English questions. It's really important that you joined us today. And don't forget, there's a link to Jennifer's channel and website below. So don't forget to check that out and all the teaching materials that she has there. And if you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the Preply YouTube channel so we can start making more videos just like this for you guys. So yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. And thank you, Jennifer. And
Thank you.
care.
Okay, take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.